My family for generations were entrepreneurs.
Oh.
One of the reasons my grandparents had to come to the United States, where they were living in Ukraine, and it was during the Bolshevik takeover of the Russian states, and my grandparents were merchants. They sold things, and they didn't. So they were Jewish merchants, and so they would be killed. So, but even when they came to the United States, they started their own business. And one thing I notice here, there's so many immigrants, and you would know this, that come here. It's difficult to get work, so they start their own business. And I find that the most successful and dedicated and determined, we're going to make this happen, are particularly Asian women. They start their own businesses here in the U.S., and it's just amazing. And so that was in my blood. And my father was an entrepreneur. And when my grandparents came to Arizona, my dad said, "Come here. There's a lot of opportunity." They bought overalls and chickens, and they put fresh eggs in their pockets every day and went door to door selling eggs. So I didn't see the risk in doing that. It was something I knew I always wanted to do.
Oh.
Now, and so that because of that, I knew I wasn't going to stay in corporate life all my life, that I wanted to be on a bigger stage, helping more people than just one company. And I'd had enough of the corporate craziness. So, the hierarchy and all of that. So I really wanted to have the power to create what I wanted to create. So did it take courage? A lot of people said that you're so brave. I didn't see it as bravery. I'd always had a plan. In fact, I told my boss, the day he hired me in my last job, I said, I'm going to be here about 5 years and I'm going to start my own business and write books. And then the day I resigned, he was shocked. And I said, I told you 5 years ago that I wanted to start my own business and write books. And he says, but I didn't believe you because nobody does that.
Oh my gosh.
And I'm like, you know what? No, I do that. And it's fine that people stay in places that if they're challenged. But again, when I talk about women, my doctoral dissertation was on smart, strong women in the workplace, and they tend to go from job to job and start their own businesses much more frequently than men. Because their great drivers are motion. I have to have new challenges. I have to keep learning. And it has to be significant. It has to be meaningful. So what I found with the women, that instead of titles and money, that it was motion and meaning. So even when I have coached, so like I was coaching this woman in China who had reached a very high level in her company, but she was bored to death. And that's what happens with a lot of women. They get very bored. And I said, and she said, I'm tired of the politics here. I just, I don't want to be here anymore. But I have a family. I have to take care of my parents, my kids. And, I make the most money. And everyone says you shouldn't leave. You've got such a good salary and a great position. And I said to her, should. You don't like this job, but you're living by everybody's shoulds. You're living by your friends who tell you not to leave. You're living by, your society. Have you asked your family? And she said, no. I said, well, maybe they would support you. And I said, you've reached this level. And exactly like what you just said to me, could you not find more challenge somewhere else with all your experience? Well, I don't know. I shouldn't leave. Well, 2 hours later, after the coaching, she came back to me and said, okay, I got it. I had to sit with it. You're right. I'm living by shoulds instead of what I want. And of course, I can either get a job somewhere else or even start working on creating my own consulting firm. So we live by too many shoulds.
Yeah.
Too many shoulds. I shouldn't do that. I have a family to support. That's what I always hear with the men. I have a family to support. Have you asked your family? Would they support you in doing something else? Usually they say yes, because they don't want to see you burnt out and angry. You know? So look at your shoulds and see how they're getting in the way of your dreams.
Beautiful.
You may take it as me turning it on its head, but it is listening to younger people because they see things differently, and they see things differently for a reason. And I think that sometimes the older generations don't pay enough attention to why it's seen differently, and seeing word differently, how can we move forward faster? How can we move forward with more grace? Perhaps. And then, to your point, never, ever, ever dismiss the wisdom of our seniors. You laugh, but I remember my grandpa and grandma, I told you, on the farm. To this day, I know what herbs to use for healing certain things. Just because they told me. They don't teach you that at school. Right? And that's, and it's not just the wisdom of curing something when you're in a field. It's the wisdom of appreciating and respecting the wisdom of our elders.
Wow.
And I think that's very important.
Beautiful.